All right, friends. It is just after 7:30, and I am here with you. I'm here with you live. So I'm going to wait a few minutes, and we are going to see who jumps on. It's been a few weeks, so I don't know if anybody will even join me tonight, but we're here. So I hope that you will join me. If not, no big whoop, but many folks will probably check this out later on, and that's totally fine. Um, I'm going to do introductions here real quick, and I'll have to reintroduce throughout the event tonight. But I just want to tell you that my name is Matt Morgan, and you are in my workshop. So you probably don't know this, but, well, I guess, yes, over here are my 3D printers, and I have been printing up a storm working on my Halloween costume. So I don't know what you guys are going to be for Halloween, but I have a plan. It's going to be great. I see that we got some folks live. If you would drop a comment, let me know that you're here, please. And we will get started shortly. I'm just going to burn a couple minutes while we wait for some folks to get on. And then we'll continue on in tonight's conversation. So thank you for being here tonight. I've got some really interesting information to share. We, for the first time in ever, actually, we've gotten some really interesting and helpful information before disaffiliation votes that are happening in the annual conference, and I just want to share some of that information with you guys tonight. So I have scanned it in, I have it all official on my computer, and you guys will be able to see it. Actually, probably should have checked that out before. Let's look here and see. Yep, that's what I was afraid of. Let me check here, and there it is. Good. All right. Probably should have done that before I went live. But anyway, I'm live here with you tonight. And I hope that you guys are interested in some great conversation because it's going to be fun. So wait just a couple more minutes. I see people are getting on. I just don't know who is getting on. So if you would drop a comment and let me know. Say hi. Say good evening. Ask a question. Tell me a joke, do something to let me know that you're here, and that way I'll know for sure. And we can go ahead and get started in just a moment. But again, I'm going to wait for a few more minutes while people are getting on, and I'm going to make sure I have all the right buttons programmed here so I don't mess this up again. Probably will. We'll just have to see. All right, I think that should be it. Welcome to the stream, everyone. If you would please drop me a comment, let me know that you're here. And I'm just going to say this. If you show up in the middle of the week and you see this conversation and you're like, I would love to, let Matt know I was here. You can always drop a comment. I read those throughout the week and will respond if you have a question or concern. I'll do my best to respond during the week also. So even if you're not here live tonight on Tuesday evening, I'll try to do my best to address any concerns that you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. I see my numbers are doing this. I was hoping some more folks would join us live tonight, but we'll have to see what happens. So if you would, let's take a second and let's pray. Gracious God, thank you so much for this night. God, I thank you for the gift of your church and allowing us as pastors to be stewards of it and as parishioners to be in support and love of it. God, I just ask that everything we do tonight would glorify your name, and God, keep us on track to do your work. Father, we love you and we thank you for this time, and all this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So welcome everyone for being here tonight. You are going to get some information that I hope other districts are getting, but I'm just very, very thankful that we have a district superintendent who disseminated a bunch of information to us over this last week. So we had a meeting on, hang on. Let me introduce myself. My name is Matt Morgan. I am the pastor of a new church plant in Tulsa called Community Brookside. We are a fantastic United Methodist congregation that is growing, and I'm excited about it. But you tonight are in my house, so I want to remind you that the things I say tonight are not necessarily respective or representative of the United Methodist Church in whole. These are just my opinions and thoughts. I just wanted to come and be able to answer questions that you might have about disaffiliations, about the church, about the state of Methodism. And I want to do that with giving you my own opinion and my own research. I do not speak for the United Methodist Church. I don't speak for my district superintendent. I don't speak for anybody but myself. So tonight, I'm going to share information that I got, and I will digest it with you. So if you have opinions or thoughts, I would love to hear those. If you have a question about these things, I would love to hear those too. But let's be in conversation. So welcome to my workshop. This is my 3D printing, laser cutting, building. I've got like designs back here of stuff I've been working on. Long story. Pay no attention to the chemicals in the background. It's all fine. So tonight I want to talk about some information that we got on Sunday. So Sunday afternoon, we had a district-wide meeting where the clergy were required to come. And so we showed up, and the district superintendent gave us some great information about the disaffiliating churches. So many of you know that our last round of disaffiliation happens this very weekend in Oklahoma City. Many of you probably don't remember that this will be our third vote on disaffiliating churches. So we've had now, this will be our third special called annual conference of the Oklahoma United Methodist Church to deal specifically with churches who want to leave our denomination. However, at this particular meeting, we are going to be presented with more information than we've ever received before being able to vote on these churches. And so I want to share with you some of the information that was given to us on Sunday. None of this information is secret or, not public. It should be all public information, and that's why I want to do my best to share it with you tonight. So at this meeting, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, where all of the United Methodist pastors were called together by our district superintendent so she could present to us information about the churches disaffiliating to kind of prepare us for what the budget of 2024 and 2025 will look like, and to just answer any questions that we might have after looking at some of the data. So she broke us down into small groups. We were able to have conversation with other pastors around us and talk about what it looked like for this information, what questions it caused in us. So I see that Sylvia's here. Good evening, Sylvia. Glad that you're able to be here tonight. Yeah, there was a lot of information that we got that we've never had before. So I want to share this with you. Let me see. That's not right. It's gone and done something weird. There it is. Nope, still not right. There. All right. I am going to see if this will pull up my face. Hey, look at that. My face next to some information. So we were given some handouts, and these handouts gave information about all the churches that are disaffiliating. So first of all, I want to tell you that these are the 44 churches that are disaffiliating in October of 2023. So this vote is going to happen Friday afternoon. I believe it's only going to happen Friday afternoon. I don't expect that well, and I say that, now I'm kind of questioning my timeline. I don't expect that will carry over until Saturday, but it may. I'm not for sure. But we're not just doing this. We're doing some other business of the conference as well, whereas the last couple of votes, my understanding is I missed the one in October of 2022 because I was at a wedding. But I think the other district meetings or the other annual conferences have solely worked on disaffiliation votes. This one is a 2-day event, so it's overnight, Friday night, and Saturday. And my expectation is we're doing more than just... I've looked at the conference calendar of what we're going to be doing. I just have done things since then, so I don't remember what the calendar looks like. So I want to show you, these are the names of the churches that are disaffiliating. And the biggest district here is the Lake Country District. And you can see there all of the churches that are disaffiliating there. And later on, we're going to talk about attendance and things like that because we have that information in this meeting. The smallest district here is the Crossroads District. And this is where it's really interesting because the Crossroads District is kind of the Oklahoma City area. And the church that is disaffiliating there is not like many of the others on this list. So Mosaic United Methodist Church, as it is still formally called until this conference this weekend, Mosaic is one of the most progressive churches in our conference. And Scott Snyder is the pastor, and I only got to meet him pretty much for the very first time and have conversation with him in May when he was in Tulsa for our annual conference. He's a super great guy. I like him a lot. And through the conversation that he and I had, he was seeking disaffiliation at that point because they're frustrated with the system and how they still don't feel like the Book of Discipline is changing quick enough to include our LGBTQ brothers and sisters in the full life of the church. And so they are a progressive church on the opposite of most of these other churches. And so that was what he verbalized to me. I don't know their disaffiliation paperwork or how they presented it. I just know that they are on a very different plane than most of these other churches. So between Mosaic and St. Luke's, who also said, when St. Luke's disaffiliated, their conversation was, we don't like the fact that people are being punished for, like, specifically punished for this one offense when pastors marry LGBTQ couples, or ordination happens for an ordained pastor. There are prescribed punishments now that have never been in the Book of Discipline. And so St. Luke's is like, we are not a church of hurt, and we don't want to cause harm to people who feel like LGBTQ men and women should be married in our churches, and so we're just out. That was not a very good way of summarizing their stance, but I'm trying to tell you that they left on a very different line and train of thought than most of the other churches in Oklahoma who have chosen to leave. I don't speak for all of them. I don't know all the reasons for all their disaffiliations. I just know that the conversation has revolved around conservative churches leaving because of the Book of Discipline not being held in high standard by a lot of other conferences and pastors who are directly breaking the Book of Discipline. As I have mentioned before, that is not something that happens on a regular basis here in Oklahoma. Have there been pastors that have broken the Book of Discipline to marry LGBTQ men and women? Yes, that has happened. I don't know any of the details other than I know it has happened. I don't know when. I don't know who's done it. And I don't know why I don't know that information. It's not publicly, like, talked about, I guess. I don't know. But, for us to live in covenant with one another, we need to abide by that covenant. And I fully agree with that on both the liberal and conservative sides. Just like the Book of Discipline says LGBTQ men and women can't be married in the church by our pastors, I would also say that the Book of Discipline requires us to pay our apportionments. And we are required to do that just as much as we are required not to marry LGBTQ men and women. So there are churches who are breaking Book of Discipline on both sides and pointing fingers across the middle of the church at one another, saying, see, what you're doing is wrong. See, what you're doing is wrong. And in the meantime, everybody is suffering. So without a change in the Book of Discipline, because it hasn't changed yet since 2016, other than adding paragraph 2553 in 2019 at the special called General Conference, there has been no rewrite or adjustment in the Book of Discipline since 2016. So that was the last time the Book of Discipline has been adjusted. Every 4 years, there's supposed to be amendments to the Book of Discipline, presentations to propose these amendments, and we're stuck in a book that is from 2016. Not that that's a problem. It's just that I think we are in a different conversation today than we were. If I did math, I would tell you how many years ago that was, right? A few years ago in 2016, when we were having these conversations about human sexuality, the conversation has evolved. We're talking about issues that we don't have stances on anymore. We don't have conversation regarding transgendered youth. We don't have conversations about drag queens. There are things about human sexuality that are very complicated. The Book of Discipline still doesn't address that at some point we'll need to address. We will. So as you see here, if you have any questions about any of these churches, I will do my best to tell you what I know, but I don't know a whole lot. I have not walked through the disaffiliation process with any of these other churches. The only church that I went through the disaffiliation process with was First Methodist in Tulsa. So that's the only one I can speak to specifically. But these are the churches that are leaving the denomination if their votes are ratified. And I will tell you, all 44 of these churches have passed all of their votes, as far as I know, through their district superintendents. They've been passed on to the conference trustees to be voted on and talked about and reports put together and all those things. And so when annual conference happens on Friday and Saturday, we will vote on these 44 churches because they have done the process correctly. The last time I went live, I believe we talked about the two churches that were in a lawsuit with the Oklahoma Annual Conference, and they are First Methodist Oklahoma City, and they're also Church of the Servant in Oklahoma City. Both of those churches are suing the conference for two different reasons. First, Oklahoma City is suing the conference because they feel like they have not been allowed to go through a disaffiliation vote because they feel like the conference was heaping on them more requirements than they did for anybody else. I'll address that in a second. Church of the Servant is suing the conference because they wanted to take their third disaffiliation vote. Their vote for the first time was September 11th of 2022. They voted twice on that night. Neither time did they vote to leave. So the votes were not enough to get the 66.1% that they need to go on to disaffiliate from the church. So the disaffiliation agreement says that they needed to wait 12 months until the next vote. Okay? The problem with that is that the bishop or the cabinet or somebody set a disaffiliation deadline of September 6th, I believe, 5th or 6th, that they needed, all of Oklahoma Annual Conference churches needed to vote by in order to disaffiliate. Well, because they had that year that they had to wait, September 11th comes after that September 5th or 6th deadline. And so they were not able to vote to have a disaffiliation because they weren't allowed to by the agreement. The hard part about that situation is that they missed it by 5 or 6 days. Apparently, they've done everything else right. They just weren't able to vote because the deadline was set 5 or 6 days before their 12-month period was up. And so I struggle. If we're called to be a church of grace, part of me is like, just let them vote. I make no decisions. I have no authority. But part of me is just like, we're kind of doing a disservice to them by knowing they were so close to their vote. Missing it by 4 or 5 days is very different than missing it by like weeks or months because they didn't have their stuff together. They've gotten all their stuff together. They just want to have a third vote. So that is my own opinion, and I don't know all the details behind it. I just know based on what I know about the lawsuit and the reasoning behind it. That's what I got for you. If you have more questions, drop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to help research that and answer that for you, but I don't know all the details. Now, back to First Methodist Church, Oklahoma City. First Methodist Church, Oklahoma City had a huge discrepancy in their membership numbers. When you go through the disaffiliation votes, you are required to report your membership to the district superintendent and to the cabinet to tell them how many people are members of your church, because every one of those members of your church is entitled to vote at the disaffiliation votes. The problem is there was discrepancy between December 31st of 2022 and January 12th of 2023 when they had their first movement towards disaffiliation voting. When the report was given to the district superintendent to vote, there were miraculously, I think, something like 1,400 or 2,400 people removed from their rolls that just, 12 days before, on December 31st, at the end of year numbers that all United Methodist churches are required to turn in, they had significantly more members. So I don't know all the details as to why those members were removed, but they were not removed correctly by the Book of Discipline. And that is a huge process. It takes 2 charge conferences within your church to remove those people from the rolls. However, they felt that because the district superintendent stopped their process at that point and said, no, we need to have a vitality study to make sure that your numbers match and that you're going to be able to reach all the people who consider themselves members of your church. First Oklahoma City said, no, you're being unfair, and they sued the conference. Both of those conversations right now are stalled at the Supreme Court. As of right now, the Supreme Court, I guess, has ruled, I believe our district superintendent said something like Friday or Thursday of last week, that the district court that initially heard both of the Oklahoma City cases, both for Church of the Servant and for First United Methodist Oklahoma City, that district court did not have jurisdiction, and that in fact the Oklahoma Supreme Court should have heard that case. So it really means nothing other than now a decision is going to be made, and the Supreme Court will make that decision. I don't know what that looks like for the annual conference. I don't know what that looks like for the individual churches. There's not been a decision made yet, but those 2 lawsuits are still pending. So that's why those 2 churches were not on this particular piece of paper when you're looking at churches who are trying to disaffiliate. They are not allowed at this point, because of extenuating circumstances and their lawsuits facing the conference. Okay, so I hope that is clear as mud for you. And now let's talk about some of this disaffiliation information that I know you guys are just dying to hear. So first of all, I want to say that our meeting was pretty good. And of course, I'm the kind of guy that loves going to United Methodist Church meetings because I love getting to sit with other pastors and talk to them and check on them and see how they're doing and have conversation. I just love being with people, and so being with other pastors and getting to hear about their situations and sermon series and new members and what the struggles are all helpful to me as a pastor. They remind me that I'm not alone in this, that there are other pastors who deal the same situations that I do and face the same struggles that I do. So it's always fun. Plus, I'm a guy who loves as much information as I can get my hands on regarding not just disaffiliation, but all things. I'm a history nerd. I have some really good friends who know that about me. And so all of this kind of stuff, facts and figures, although I don't always do good at interpreting them well, they're fun for me because I love just having information, concrete information I can fall back on. So I want to talk to you, and I see a ton of you folks are here, so thank you guys for being here tonight. If you would, drop a comment, say hello. If you have any questions or concerns or comments or jokes even, I want to hear them. So throw those in the comments, but I want to jump into this conversation with you about some of these numbers. So this is a lot of information for you guys to look at, but I want to point out that all 44 of the churches that we've talked about, plus an additional 18, we're going to talk about some of their information. I don't want to go fully into detail on all of this, but I want to point out just how much information we've actually gotten for the first time. Again, now this is the third disaffiliation vote. We've finally gotten some of the information that I think we've needed from the beginning. So there you go. So it goes through all of the churches. It tells you the name of the church. It tells you the city that they're in, the district that they're a part of, what county they're in. It tells you the county seat, if the church is in the town of the county seat or not, which somebody probably finds that useful. I'm not that guy. It tells you the actual breakdown of the vote, who voted yes, who voted no, and who abstained. And for the purposes of this vote, I want to remind you that if you showed up to vote and you voted abstain, it was the same. It was viewed the same as a no vote. So in order for you to have a disaffiliation vote toward the yes category, it had to be a yes, a positive yes vote. Voting no means no, and voting to abstain means that you also voted no. Okay, I hope that's clear for you. It tells you about the percentage and how much percentage was that the congregation voted on. You can see that here, and we'll just look at Ada first. That's the first one. It passed by 79%. As a reminder, you need 66% plus one vote, is my understanding. Not 67%, but 66% plus one additional person kicks it over that 66% necessary for you to disaffiliate. Tells you the membership numbers, and then it tells you your average worship attendance, number of professions of faith, and I'm assuming that is in 2023. That piece of information is not super clear. The number of baptisms within 2023, again, I hope that's in 2023. It doesn't tell us. And the amount that they are supposed to pay for apportionments in 2023. This will tell you how much of their conference apportionments they have been paid up to this year. And this is probably accurate. We're in the third quarter of the year, right? Are we there yet? Yes, we're still in the third quarter of the year. So once we get into the fourth quarter, and again, this is the not fiscal year, but in the actual year, that number will change. But 80% is about right. We're in the 75th percentile, just before the 75th percentile of the apportionment situation. So there you go. And I hope that is, when it says 0.8%, that really just means it's 80%. I hope that's a decimal problem and not necessarily... that's a question that I should probably ask at some point. That's got to be, these folks have not paid their apportionments this year because they're working towards disaffiliation, is my assumption. If somebody knows something different, let me know. But that tells you the conference percentage of apportionments, and then the percentage payout average over 2018 through 2022. So over the last few years, the average has been 100%, 100%, 100%, 94. So a lot of these churches have been paying their apportionments. Chelsea Epworth looks like is at 80%. Here's where I'm questioning. Eagleton has only paid 46% of their apportionments. That is less than 50%. If any of you ever went to school, which we all did, anything less than 50% is a failing grade. So I don't know why they haven't paid their apportionments, and their apportionments were $1,185 for 2023. I'm assuming it was something similar to that over the last few years. My guess is that they're struggling in a budget. Let's look at their numbers. So total votes, 14 yeses. Okay, so we got one abstention. The membership is 41 on paper, but average worship is 10. So I imagine that being able to pay your apportionments with 10 members is super duper hard. So with 10 folks paying 46% of their apportionments, I applaud them, because that's a big step of faith for such a small congregation. So God bless them. I hate to see these smaller churches disaffiliate, because I don't know what the future holds for them, right? Because at least with the United Methodist Church, there's a kind of a safety net. The United Methodist Church is not good about closing churches for no reason. Like, it usually takes a significant decline in assets and resources and numbers in order for those churches to be shut down. And so for Eagleton to remove themselves from that safety net, I know they've done the work, but I hope that's a wise decision. So, a lot of the membership of the churches here, I mean, you can see 60 members, 43, 41, 46, 42, 53. So there's a lot of smaller membership churches. Some of them are pretty larger, 1,000, 5,000 at Tulsa Christ. And I talked to the pastor of that church this weekend at this district meeting that I was at. And he had some interesting information about that kind of confirmed something else that we've talked about in the past. Woodward has 1,700. There's just a lot of mixed churches, medium-sized and small-sized churches in here. But I want to talk specifically about the votes, okay? Votes in relation to average worship attendance. So if you look here, let's go, for instance, Tulsa Christ, because, again, I got to talk to the pastor there, and there it is. So it's this line here. I'm going to move it where it should be pretty close to the top. So you can see it's in our district. It's in the Tulsa County. It is in the county seat. Tulsa is the county seat of Tulsa County. This is how many people voted in total, 261. And again, their membership is 5,078. And so the same kind of questions arise for me in this situation as did for Will Rogers. And so after having a conversation with somebody who knew about the situation at Will Rogers, I was able to share with you in a live video a few months back that there were conversations with district superintendents and leaders from the annual conference who are actively discouraging pastors from auditing their rolls as a way to maintain a larger vote at jurisdictional conferences. That is what I was told. And I can't speak to the validity of that other than a pastor who was specifically told not to audit his rolls were told for that reason. Because if the audit of the rolls is done, if a church says, you know what, we no longer have 5,000 members, we really only have like 987 members or whatever, that cuts down the number of delegates that we get to send to jurisdictional and general conference. And so that means that the vote from Oklahoma doesn't have as much oomph behind it if we don't have as many delegates. So it's kind of a seedy way of keeping our numbers up. And I don't like it, right? That's just my own personal opinion. I don't like it. But Bob is telling me that they've not had a chance to audit their rolls, and a lot of the folks that were considered still members are folks who've gone on and they've not been able to contact. But as of right now, they still consider all 5,000 of them members. And it makes sense. If you've not audited your rolls, if no one has said, hey, take me off your rolls, you keep them on your rolls. That's just how that normally works. But looky here. So they had, for the 5,000 people that disaffiliated, right? So all of their membership leaves, whether they are voting or not. 261 people voted to remove 5,000 people from the rolls in Oklahoma in the Oklahoma Annual Conference. And so I struggle with that. That is a very small number compared to the total number of members of that church. But if you look over here at their average attendance is 218. So it's a solid medium-sized church here in Oklahoma, and 261 people showed up to vote. So more people showed up to vote than would normally show up to worship on an average Sunday. So that's kind of what I'm seeing from a lot of these churches. A lot of these churches, when it comes time to vote, they have folks who show back up to make sure that their voice is heard when they vote. Just like on voting day, we do our absolute best, don't we, people who are registered voters, to go and make our voice heard. And so we show up. We don't show up to vote every day. We don't show up to vote every year, but by golly, those big votes we show up for. Same kind of situation happens in the church as well. So I hope that makes sense to you. But I still struggle with the fact that a lot of these churches who are disaffiliating these larger numbers haven't done a good enough job of auditing their roles. And that's not me picking on Tulsa Christ. That's me picking on all of us, right? So a lot of the folks who are leaving because the book of discipline isn't being followed by some pastors, again, we're talking about the pointing the fingers across each other. Part of the book of discipline requires us to be auditing our roles in a very specific way. And so it's not being done by some of these pastors and some of these churches. So I just want to make you guys aware of that. So look at this. Tulsa Christ. Good for them. 4 professions of faith this year, 4 baptisms. Praise God. We want to see growth. This is the total number of their apportionments for the year. I'm assuming they're saving that and not paying the apportionments. And part of me thinks, I remember hearing something like, if you're planning on disaffiliating, to not pay the conference because it gets complicated, save that, and then you make a lump sum of 3 years worth of apportionment payments to the annual conference when you disaffiliate. So I think that maybe that's the way it works. I'm not 100% sure, but again, over the last, 2019 to 2022, or is it 2018? 2018 to 2022, Tulsa Christ has only paid 81% of their apportionments. So most of these churches have paid 100%, 100%, 100%. Some of these churches I've never heard of. Wacomas, never heard of it, but they paid 73%. A church like Tulsa Christ should be paying 100% of its apportionments. Now, I don't know their budget, but listen, you're supposed to pay your apportionments. It's part of the book of discipline. Heather says, and the number of members contact with voting information far exceeds the number that comes to vote. That's 100% true, Heather. I agree with you. Tons of people are contacted. And I will tell you that part of the requirement for disaffiliation is that you do your absolute darndest to contact members any way possible. Mail, email, postcard, newsletters, any way that your church, social media, any way that your church has a contact for your members, your church is supposed to contact your members that way. So Heather says, yes, that's right. So and Heather knows this. So I trust your conversation there, Heather, that the conference asks you to hold your apportionments until end of the disaffiliation conversation. And then you will either, if you don't, pass the vote and don't get the conference, that's okay. So Mark says 80% is paid year to date. I don't know what you mean by that, Mark. So could you clarify that? That would be marvelous. Anyway, so yeah, then again, even when these churches take their votes to disaffiliate, they cannot disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church until that vote is ratified by the annual conference. And that's what we're going to be working on this weekend, is ratifying these votes. Heather says they still have payments to make. I'm sure they do, and I hope that they are. Some of these non-conference things, not non-conference things, but there are conference apportionments that are not required, that are super important. So things like Restore Hope here in Tulsa, things like Skyline Urban Ministry in Oklahoma City, Neighborhood Services Organization, all of these great ministries that United Methodist Church supports, I do believe should still be paid for. They still have payments to make. Have 3 months left to pay apportionment. Okay, so I think, oh, right, so it's year to date. Okay, I think I get what you're saying, Mark. That 80% is paid year to date. Where is that? So we're talking about Tulsa First, or sorry, Tulsa Christ. No, so year to date, they've only paid 1.46% of their conference apportionments. They, on average, pay 81% of their conference apportionments as of 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. So I think you might be mistaken there, Mark. Either that or I'm not good at numbers, which is also very true. So anyway, let's move on. So again, Tulsa Christ is just one example. I know Tulsa Christ. I really respect Bob Feist, who's the pastor there. One of my former students is their youth minister there, and I have a huge respect. They're right down the road from us, and so I just love the work that Bob has done. And again, like, I think that what many of us are neglecting to talk about is how painful it is that we will no longer be in the same like room as some of these people that have been our mentors and pastors that we've admired for years and years and years. That, I think, is one of the terrible aspects of disaffiliation that I don't think is talked about enough. I know that hearts are broken and people are angry and bitter and making accusations back and forth, the left and the right. And the problem is there are people in the middle who get caught up in all of this and they hear both sides of it, and it's heartbreaking even more. But genuinely, relationships are important, and sometimes those relationships shift based on these particular votes. And I hate that. Like, some of my best friends in our conference are disaffiliating or have disaffiliated. And it just breaks my heart. I'm not going to work with them, but am I still going to see them and love them? Yes. Does it change my opinion of them? Not at all. Not even a little. So, yeah, there's some heartache that comes through this. And Heather says, absolutely 100%. There's heartache that's happening on every side of this argument and these conversations, and it's just breaking my heart. So let me share this with you. So not only are there 44 churches disaffiliating at this annual conference, but this is a list of 18 churches. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it's a list of 15 churches, but I know there's going to be 18 that we're going to talk about who are closing. So before I knew, I was like, why is this? Look, if you look, this is all red. This is all blue. I was not expecting a color coordinated situation. So when I flipped the page, I wasn't paying attention to the colors. I'm like, why do we not have votes? If these churches are closing, or not closing, if these churches are disaffiliating, why do we not have these votes? What happened here? What are we missing? Yeah, I'm an idiot. These churches are actually closing. So these folks are going to be voted on to close at this annual conference. And it's another heartbreaking situation. We have not had an annual conference recently with these kind of numbers of churches closing. And so to me, that's sad. That just speaks to the fact that we're not able to gain traction in some of the communities that we're in, or we've lost, I don't want to say we've lost our relevance, because the gospel of Jesus is never irrelevant, right? But maybe the approach to ministry is not working well in these areas. I don't know. But it's always heartbreaking to see churches close. You can see that the district that these churches are a part of, how many people are in attendance, and you can see here, this is heartbreaking here. And this is nice. So Blackburn had 3 professions of faith last year. So praise God for that. That's wonderful. But there's a lot of zeros in both of these categories. And friends, when you're in small communities, it's sometimes hard to make new members of a church. So you can see here the average worship attendance numbers: 11, 6, 16, 15, 8. These are like at Community Brookside. This is what it looked like for us when we were getting started and getting going. 20, 30, 60, 40, 10, 30, 10, 10, 8, 10, right? The numbers were super inconsistent for us for the first year. And then once we started taking off, we were immediately struck with COVID. So we dropped back down into those numbers. But gosh, I want you guys to appreciate the generations of folks that were raised in these churches, the marriages, the funerals, the celebrations of life, the baptisms, the Sunday school classes, vacation Bible schools, the Bibles that were purchased by these churches and given to third graders, like all the amazing ministries that were done in the United Methodist Church. And these churches are closing. So I want us to remember that even in the midst of disaffiliation, there are still acts of the annual conference that we have to do that are still heartbreaking and important to the ministry of the church. So if you look here, you can see the amount of apportionments that they were billed. And they were billed on all of those 15 churches, a total of $38,000 for apportionments. They have paid 0.46% of those apportionments to this date, and there is no average percentage in total over the last few years. So that's kind of sad. But look, even these tiny churches who were struggling just to survive were still honoring the system and paying their apportionments 100% over the average last 4 years. So praise God for that. That's tough and it's heartbreaking, but it's still interesting news. So some of these churches who have membership of 60, 14 votes, membership of 113, 23 votes, membership of 1,400, 231 votes. Another church in our district is the Broken Arrow First, right? So Broken Arrow First on paper, 3,200 members, right here. You can see that, 3,200 members. Average worship's 400 a week, 451 voted. So that's about right. I don't know. 95% is a lot of folks in a city like Broken Arrow that sway one direction. That's interesting to me. I know that First Tulsa, when they disaffiliated, it was something like 94.96%. So almost 95%, almost probably the exact same numbers voted to disaffiliate. And I can only tell you my own experience of what going through the disaffiliation process looked like. And I will talk a little bit about some of the things that we heard at this district meeting. So on Sunday, when we went to this district meeting and we were talking about these churches that are disaffiliating, one of the things that our district superintendent said was that out of the 44 churches that are disaffiliating, in our district, there were 6, I believe. Let's go back to this piece of paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So out of all 6 of these United Methodist churches that were disaffiliating, our district superintendent said that all 6 of them at these district meetings or at the disaffiliation meetings presented incorrect or misinformation. The hard part was that's not enough information for me. Like, what was the information that they presented? Was it... There's a huge difference in my mind between somebody getting the facts and figures wrong, like, 37% of our apportionment went to this thing, right? If you get that number wrong, it was actually 32%. You got that wrong. That's an accidental deletion or an accidental, misrepresentation of numbers versus pastors who say, we have to leave not just about human sexuality, but they're going to start allowing pastors to marry giraffes. That is a false and blatant lie. There's a huge difference between those two things, and they're both misinformation. And so I wish that we would have had some examples of what this misinformation was. So while the DS presented us with that, it wasn't enough information for me. I left with some more questions, and I didn't feel like that was a right place to ask in a right time because people were already becoming a little confrontational. Some of the pastors whose churches are disaffiliating were at that meeting. 3 of the 6 pastors were there at that meeting, and 2 of them spoke up and were frustrated by the fact that our DS said that and didn't feel like they were giving out misinformation. So there's truth mixed in there somewhere, but I struggle with it. So Mark says misinformation versus different perspectives. Man, I struggle with that. There's truth and there's fiction. Misinformation is in my mind intentional. DS did not call out any churches. She didn't call it any specific churches. She just said all of the churches that were going through the disaffiliation vote here in the Council Oak District, all of them presented misinformation or false information, or I think are the words that she used. So it wasn't a conversation about misinformation versus different perspectives. When the words are misinformation and false information, I would like to know more. Because again, I think false information can be, you give out a statistic that might be wrong. That's false. It's very different than saying the Methodist Church is going to start ordaining clowns who have 4 arms. It's a lie. That's different. I I don't think misinformation and different perspectives are the same thing, or not the same thing. I don't think they hold the same weight, in my opinion. So, any hoozle. Let's continue on. Through that conversation, two of those pastors who spoke out were not angry, but they were definitely defensive because they think they presented correct information all the time. So I don't know if there was a miscommunication between the DS and these pastors, or if it was a meeting that these guys were at that they said something maybe that was inaccurate, or I left that meeting seeking more information. Like, I need more information than that. What I will tell you is that I have heard horror stories, and this is just me spreading gossip with you for a second. I have heard horror stories from both sides, from people who are trying to go through the disaffiliation process, who have said things like, our district superintendent has been unfair, or said something that was wrong, or tried to undermine the situation. And that's awful if that's happening. But I will say the same thing about pastors who are being disingenuous or deceitful or lying or spreading misinformation intentionally with the purpose to cause fear in their congregations. Both of those things are equally disturbing in my mind, and shouldn't be happening. I will tell you from my personal experiences, my own, I have not seen that in the Council Oak District. I have not seen our district superintendent undermine the process. We went through the disaffiliation process with First Methodist downtown. I did not see that. I think our district superintendent did an incredible job of doing the work of the church that was necessary to make sure that First was adequately represented and the votes were tallied, and doing the job by the book. She did, in any of the meetings that I was a part of, the district superintendent never gave any facts or figures, never tried to plead or beg to keep First Methodist to stay. She presided over the meetings and let the meetings occur. That is my personal experience with my DS. But I've heard other conversations that are not of that opinion in other districts. And I think that's awful. I think, God, I struggle so much, guys, with these conversations, because pastors who lead through fear, the gospel of Jesus Christ is not fear-inducing. And when we try to lead out of fear to persuade, or with an agenda to try to get people to move one way or another, we are doing church wrong. And by golly, if I am guilty of that, please, someone approach me and tell me that I'm wrong, because I don't ever want to be that guy. And the same goes for any conference-appointed official. If you are leading with an agenda, if you are pushing people one way or the other, that's unfair and it's wrong. Not that I get to tell anything to a DS, because I'm literally the lowest on the totem pole, but I am equally disgusted with any conference representative who would lead people astray, just as I am of any pastor who would lead their congregation astray. So I struggle with the disaffiliation stuff, but here's what I wanted to make sure that you guys heard me say tonight. You know what? First, let's look at some numbers. Then I'm going to get serious. All right. These are some different numbers. Conversations that I've heard through the grapevine are through the more progressive churches, is that all of these conservative churches just want to leave because they want to keep their property. It's not true. It's not true. We can't just blanket statement and say any particular reason is the one reason, other than 2553, which should be the one and only reason. Book of Discipline says human sexuality. You are either for it or against it, or reasons of conscience for the way that the Book of Discipline was changed in 2019. Those are the only reasons for you to leave the church. So, you have these gossip mills that say, oh, well, they're leaving because they want to keep their property, or, oh, they're a pastor who's been a pastor there for, 25 years, and they want to continue to be the pastor there without being, told what they have to leave. There's just a lot of those conversations, and I think they're awful. But here's what I want to point out. I think we do have to consider that when these churches disaffiliate, they're going to be taking not just a piece of United Methodist history with them, they're going to be taking their buildings and their assets. And I think it's important for us to know kind of what those numbers look like. And up until this point, we have not seen those numbers. And so we, at this meeting on on Sunday, we're able to get those numbers from our DS. And so this is what this looks like. Ada First, land, buildings, equipment, $12 million. Adair, $1.49 million. Allen, $649,000. Atoka, $1.16 mil. Like, that is a lot of assets and resources. And these are all assets and resources that are going to leave with these disaffiliating churches because we are suspending the I'm blanking on what it's called. The trust clause. Thank you. We are suspending the trust clause throughout the disaffiliation process to allow these churches a graceful way to take their property. They are going to pay something to every district that they're a part of and to the United Methodist Oklahoma Annual Conference. So this is not free property they're just going to walk away with. Some of these churches have to pay a significant portion of dollars to the annual conference as a way to leave with their assets intact. So for First Methodist Church Tulsa, again, the only example that I personally kind of got to see from the inside, they paid, I believe it was $1.125 million to leave the Oklahoma Annual Conference. On paper, they took out something like $58 million worth of property, assets, bank accounts, stocks and bonds, things like that. So it's a lot. They took a lot with them, but they still had to pay something as a way to honor the system that they're a part of. So I just want you to look at some of these numbers. Like, you know what? I'm just going to show you the total number. So out of all these 44 churches, the 44 churches are leaving with a total combined asset of $120,654,730. And that's a lot of money. It's a lot of assets that are being sent away. Now, I wish that they would have told us what their payout was going to be. I think that's an important piece of information that we don't have here. But this tells you all about, like, who's the next closest United Methodist Church, what the population of their towns are, median income, things like that. So there's a lot of great information on these sheets. And I am not personally going to make these available outside of this conversation. So I'm just not. I'm not going to send them to anybody because it's not my responsibility. I'm sure that this information, I'm not sure of anything anymore, actually, but it would be nice if the conference had this same kind of information on their website. I would hope that they do. So go to okumc.org and look through the conference website, and then you'll be able to see if it's on there or not. But I'm not going to personally make these available. Let's see here. These are the churches that are closing down, and it talks about the different kind of assets that they have as well. There's not a grand total, and I probably should have done that math before I started tonight, but I just wanted you to see what the impact of disaffiliation is going to look like for the church. And let me remind you that not all of these churches' assets are liquid, right? So the money that these churches have wrapped up in land and property and stuff, let's think about what's happened through land values just since 2020, right? Property values increased. The interest rates were down in 2020, 21, even into 2022 until they started spiking and going back up. And now property values are basically like at an all-time high. And as we know, property values continue to increase. When these churches bought and paid for these properties, they were not worth that kind of money. Let's be clear, they were worth money and very important to the United Methodist Church. Otherwise, they wouldn't have built churches there. But all of those assets are leaving the books. And at this meeting, we talked about some of the budget information. And I will tell you just real quickly that because of the disaffiliation of assets and these assets going away, some of the things like the stabilization fund is what, when these when these churches disaffiliate, when they pay their 3 years of apportionments and their unpaid pastor pension liabilities to the conference, it goes into a fund called the stabilization fund. And out of that stabilization fund, the United Methodist Church here in Oklahoma, the conference has said, we are going to reduce apportionments for every church that remains United Methodist by, I believe it was 29% cut to apportionments across the board, because the conference has said, you know what, we recognize that there's been a bloat and we want to make sure that we're nimble. I'm sure there were other reasons than that. Obviously, they're going to be losing out on some of these larger churches who are supposed to be paying 100% of their apportionments. But they're going to use $1.75 million out of this stabilization fund to help offset the cost for 2024 of the disaffiliation churches or disaffiliating churches who are not paying into that. OKUMC Camps is going to be an apportioned fund from now on. The Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference is going to be a apportioned fund from now on. Some of the electional ministries are still going to remain that way, but you can make pledges to them, like CJM and Restore Hope and Cooks and Hills and all those great United Methodist ministries. And then they're going to reassess through 2024 what we need to do for 2025. So, we got some of our fears alleviated that, we're not shutting down all these churches. We're not, as far as I know, we're not redistricting, but I don't see how we can't not redistrict. Does that make sense? What I'm meaning to say is I'm pretty sure at some point soon we're going to have a conversation of, do we need 8 districts in the Oklahoma Annual Conference, or do we need 6? My personal vote would be, I think we still need 8 districts, or maybe we need 12 districts again. We had 12 previously, and we cut them down to 8. But maybe we cut the salaries for our district superintendents, and we make them responsible for fewer churches. We allow the district superintendents to really be connectional with the pastors that they're serving under, or serving over, and really get to know the intimate details of all their churches. I would love to see something like that, a really strong leadership model where the district superintendent is more like an accountability partner for pastors rather than their boss. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy my boss. I like our DS. I think she is doing a great job and has been stressed out. Sorry, that's my hands, in case you heard that. My hands were squeaking. Anyway, but we've got to do something to make sure that churches are being held accountable for, if you're not making new disciples, why not? The district superintendents really need to be kind of dialing in and figuring out, maybe the church is in a wrong location. Maybe it's time we move that church out of whatever small town into a more growing area where people from that town have moved. So there's at least some connection. We've got to be more creative in the way that we're doing ministry. We've got to be creative in how we fund the ministries that we're doing. That's why we're trying to do something unique at Community Brookside. And I can't talk much about that plan here and now. But we've got to do something, because this, the 128 churches that are disaffiliating, for all of 2022 and 2023, they're removing not just resources, but they're removing churches that we're going to have to reallocate and refigure out. Well, now the district doesn't make sense because we've got 13 churches in the Tulsa area and 2 in Collinsville, or I don't know, some other, small town around Tulsa, that we might need to put them with a different district that makes more sense. So if you have any other thoughts or questions about that, let me know. But I think that we need more districts that are more intimate with the pastors, that are not, being a district superintendent, I think, is a lot more responsibility, but I don't think it's, I don't know how much they make. I know it's a significant amount of money. I just struggle with that kind of amount of money being paid to anybody. Personally, yeah. I don't know. I think that we're called to be servants. We're supposed to make a good living, but we're called to be servants too. So if, I don't know. I have conflicted feelings. I don't know if you knew that about me or not. But anyway, that's that. So let's talk, guys. I've presented you with some good information, some questions and concerns that I have, thoughts. What questions do you have about disaffiliation happening on Friday and Saturday? What do you want to know? What are you thinking about? What are you afraid of? Let's have that conversation real quick before I move on to what my final point of the night is going to be. And I want you to stick around for that, because I think it's super. Mark says, more districts really raise unnecessary costs. I agree to an extent. I think if we do it like we've done it for the past, 200 years, yes, it does. But I think if we're creative about it and decrease the, if we decrease the amount of district administrators, district headquarters. It would be nice if all the district superintendents were housed in a local church. That would save a significant amount of money, right? It's one quick, easy way to, give them their own space within a building that is a United Methodist owned building that, is paid for, and there's very little overhead there. You decrease the salaries of district superintendents significantly, make them in charge of less things. Dual charge church appointed DS. Love it. That's great. My wife is calling me and she knows I'm live, so I'm wondering if there's a problem. Love you, honey. I can't answer that right now. Dual charge church appointed DS. So have a pastor who is also a DS who's preaching every Sunday. Makes it hard for them to visit, the churches they're in charge of. But it's creative. We've got to just be creative. We've got to learn to be nimble again. We've got to adapt to the changes that are happening in our conference. And if anything is clear, guys, it should be that the United Methodist Church has struggled to adapt since its creation in 1968. The first book of discipline from that moment on in 1972 has been challenged and amended and sometimes changed and sometimes not. And people are struggling to get on board with the way the United Methodist Church needs to change. And it's not strictly regarding human sexuality. I'm talking in many other contexts, dealing with women's issues, with racial issues, with all kinds of things. The United Methodist Church has to be more nimble. So we got to be creative. So that's my hope. But I appreciate you. Mark says agreed. I would love to hear more thoughts, not just about this, but does your heart break over disaffiliation? For many of my folks in my congregation, the vast majority of my folks came from churches that were not United Methodist or have not been in church for sometimes decades. So for them, when it came time to disaffiliate, they didn't really care. They, barely know that we're affiliated anyway. I say that's not accurate. I'm very clear that we are a United Methodist Church, that we believe the Book of Discipline of the United Methodist Church, that all that stuff. But for them, being a new church start, we're not currently paying apportionments yet because we're not an officially chartered church. There's a lot of things that we don't get to operate fully as a church because the district helps pay our payroll. And by that, I mean they take our funds from our church. They just lump it in with their district salaries that they pay, and they just pay our payroll for us out of our own account. So there are things that the district assists us with that not a lot of churches get to have because we are not a chartered church at this point. We're moving that direction, and we're getting darn close. But we're going to have to be able to adapt and shift and change if we want the United Methodist Church to live on, not just for the next 50 years, but for the next 200, like it's been, for a church for the last 200. So, Mark says, major loss for me personally, as I chose to continue ministry with a disaffiliating church. That's tough, Mark, and I'm sorry, buddy. Yeah, and it's... When you grow to love your congregation like many of us pastors do, when you know your people intimately, when you've cried with them and bled with them, when you've prayed for them before surgeries, when you've buried their loved ones, when you've baptized their babies, when you are a pastor who has done that for your church to disaffiliate, of course you want to go with them, right? That's not everybody's situation. Not everybody is choosing to do that. But I could see how that would be incredibly hard to step away from that church, even though it's chosen to disaffiliate. So, yeah, that's tough. And I'm sorry, man. Let's wind down for tonight. But if you haven't made a comment, I would love for you to drop one. Just tell me that you've been here. Ask a question. Tell me your concerns. Tell me your thoughts. But before we leave, I have to say this. I have to. As painful as our votes are going to be Friday and Saturday, even if we disagree with disaffiliation, even if we're fearful that our, pastors have been disingenuous or our district superintendents have been less than honest, it is important for us as United Methodist pastors, people of grace and love. I think it's important for us to ratify votes that have been made. And I know not everybody agrees with me. I know there are some people who definitely disagree with me in this area. But for me, as a United Methodist pastor who loves my brothers and sisters who are disaffiliating, I think it's important for us to honor the work that they've done. If they've gotten through the disaffiliation process, if they've gotten it ratified by their DS, if they've done the votes, if they've done the heartbreaking, backbreaking work of notifying their congregations to show up to vote, if they've taken those votes, if they've been honest in all those things, and the DSs have said, yep, you've checked all the boxes and you can disaffiliate, then we as a conference need to ratify that vote. And I hate it, but we need to do it. So Mark says, my prayer is that we not add to our pain and loss. And that's exactly what will happen. If we have people that vote no, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to convince you. If you have it in your heart of hearts that you want to vote no, vote no. I'm not trying to tell you how to vote, but I'm thinking that if you are at this point, well, what do I do? If you don't know, man, these churches have worked so hard to get to the point where they have made a decision for what they think is best for their context. It would be doing an incredible dishonor for us as United Methodist pastors as part of this connection to say, no, we're going to hold you hostage in this connection because you made an agreement with us. You can't leave. That is causing more harm than needs to be caused. And part of, we talked about, Wesley's 3 rules: do no harm, do good. And it's not just stay in love with God, but it's attend to the ordinances of God. Don't say stay in love with God. It is bigger than that. God is asking us to do things. We must attend to the things that God is asking us to do. That's love our brothers and sisters. That's tell the world about Jesus. That's be in mission. That's serve people who have less. That's be voices of justice when injustice is the voice that overtakes them all. We have responsibilities. Those are the 3 things that we have to do. And when we say, you know what, I'm voting no as a way to just, then that's causing harm that we don't need to cause. Don't get me wrong. If there are votes for us to learn more information, or if there's somebody who wants to bring a point of interest or whatever, I will probably vote to hear those as I have done in the past. If anybody says, I would like for us to vote, I want to amend the vote to talk about this specific church, I want to hear what if somebody has information, I want to hear it. Unless there's some drastic information that's presented at annual conference, I know how I'm going to vote already. And I'm talking drastic, like, I don't even know what the situation would be. I know how I'm going to vote. And I will vote to ratify these churches' hard work. That's just me personally. I don't like that we even have to be here for this, because it breaks my heart that our church is splintering. But I encourage you as a person of faith, if you're a pastor who's going to vote, or a delegate that's going to vote, I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I don't have the right to do that. But I think it's important that we really think through what our votes say about us and what it says about how much we love our brothers and honor the work that they've done. Does that make sense? If you agree, disagree, throw that up here. I want to talk about it. But that was kind of the last thing I wanted to share with you before we call it a night. This is important for our church. This is important for the future of the United Methodist Church, that we don't hold people hostage to a church that they disagree with in a direction of a church that is going something opposite of their own convictions. So that's just my own personal stance on that. Mark says it will destroy communities if held hostage, and he's right. And it will bring more lawsuits, which, why would we do that? I mean, not only is it expensive and it's throwing money away that could be going to do the mission of Jesus, but it will cause bigger concern, and it is a terrible representation of the church to the world, right? And we want to tell the world that we are there for them, to show them the love of Jesus, and we can't even show that to our brothers and sisters who are part of us, right? So we don't want to do that. I hate the state of our church now, but I have hope. I talked about it with Jamie Willis last time we did a live, that I think that the disaffiliating that's happening in our churches right now will allow our churches to do the best work in their own communities. We are going to become more contextual. The United Methodist Church will become more contextual. Those who are those who are disaffiliating will also have the ability to become more contextual in a way that fits them. And we want that, don't we? I mean, don't get me wrong. I think covenant is wonderful, and I think we need to live into our covenant that we've chosen to be a part of. But I think this will free us. If the radical Methodists are going to become more radical, then let them be more radical. If the conservative Methodists who are leaving or want to be more conservative, let them be more conservative. And churches in the middle will find a place. They always have. And that means that, they're just going to need to make sure that their voices are heard more. And the only way that's happening is if the moderate church is important, those churches will be the ones that are growing, right? Again, that's not to make light of the situation, and I hope I'm not trivializing that, but this is a tough situation for us to be in, but the way we are responding right now is an example to the world, and I hope that we're putting off an example of what the church can look like. Mark says, it's a challenge/opportunity for the UMC to redesign, redefine, and reach our communities for Christ. Absolutely. And it's the same for those who are disaffiliating, right? Whether they choose to join up with another congregation or another denomination, or if they want to remain independent, it gives them an opportunity to do the same thing. Redesign, redefine, and reach. I like that. That should be on a t-shirt. Okay? I'm stealing it. I'm just kidding. I won't. If I do, I'll at least credit you, Mark. Okay? So here's the situation. I'm wrapping up for tonight. I'm going to say a quick prayer for us. It'll be, 37 seconds, and that's it. But I want to see if anybody has any thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, anything you want to raise before we call it a night. I'm going to give you about 37 seconds to do that, and then we're going to have a 37-second prayer. So in the next minute, we're wrapping up. Mark says yours. Yes, thanks. I'm just kidding. I'll make sure that you get credit. Guys, this is going to be a really important weekend for all of us, for those disaffiliating and for us who are staying. The conversation I had with Bob Feist over at Christ was heartbreaking to me. He said, Matt, I just am worried about this annual conference because after all this work, I would hate for us not to be able to fulfill where we're called to be. And I feel that. If we vote no on these churches to force them to be a part of our communication or communion as a United Methodist Church, they're going to find a way out, whether it's through lawsuits or leaving or pastors quitting and taking their congregations, leaving empty United Methodist buildings, whatever that looks like. We're going to deal with a repercussion that's going to be awful. And so I reassured him. I said, Bob, I don't think that United Methodists are that spiteful to just all of the conference vote no on ratifying your disaffiliation votes. So I'm not overly concerned about it, but I know it's a real fear. I had a conversation earlier tonight with somebody who's fearful that their whole life has been uprooted through this conversation about disaffiliation. The moves they're making and changes they're making in their ministry are going to be impacted on whether the conference says yes or no on Friday and Saturday. So I can't imagine living in that kind of fear. But my prayers go out for these folks, right? All right, well, I don't see any other conversations happening, so I'm going to wrap it up. Friends, let's take a second and let's thank God for the time that we've had together tonight. God, I thank you for conversation. I thank you for dialogue. I thank you for the United Methodist Church and those denominations that are breaking off from us. God, I believe that the kingdom is still yours and that we are just workers in that kingdom. So help us to be the people you've called us to be in every area of our lives, in the way we speak about others, the way we treat others, and the way we love our neighbor. God, I pray for blessings over this week's annual conference. And I pray for blessings over my brothers and sisters who have fought hard in every church in our conference to be where they are. Pastors who are staying, pastors who are going. But God, I pray for their ministries to bear fruit. Lord Jesus, we love you, and all these things we do for you. And all these things we pray in your name. Amen. Guys, thanks for staying with me tonight. I will do another live next week to kind of talk about annual conference, and hopefully I don't have much to report other than it was a great time had by all, and we all sang Kumbaya. I don't expect that, but I hope that. So anyway, friends, I love you. If you have any questions, please DM me, email me, text me if you've got my number. Leave a message here on my Facebook Live. I'll get back to it throughout the week. But thank you guys for being a part of our live stream tonight, and we will see you again soon. Till then, be good, everyone.